everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. My name's Alice and today I'm going to be doing the Classics book tag. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Alice and I have way too many books. I'm currently trying to work my way through a giant TBR of over 200 books. So today I thought I would bring you the Classics book tag. Now this is a book tag that's been around for a very long time. I think it was invented about 6 years ago, and it's actually one that came from a book blog which is called It's a Book's World. So I will link It's a Book's World's blog down below with the original tag. I thought I would do this tag now because I feel like just before starting BookTube and since I've started BookTube, I've really been getting into reading classics, and this is the first time really in my life that I've appreciated classics so much. I'll give you a little bit of background to my reading of classics as we go along, hopefully with the questions. There are 10 questions in this tag today. Let's get straight into the questions. So question 1 asks me to give an overhyped classic I really didn't like. This is the easiest question for me on the tag. An overhyped classic that I really didn't like is actually the first classic that I read. This is where I think it went wrong for me with classics, because the first classic that I read was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and I'm sorry to say for all you Wuthering Heights fans out there, Wuthering Heights really stopped me from wanting to read classics. It was obviously the wrong one for me at the wrong time, but I was so disappointed by this classic that it really made me think, oh, reading classics just isn't for me. I was so overhyped for Wuthering Heights. I thought it would be really good. I knew that the main protagonists were Heathcliff and Cathy. I knew already that there was a bit with a ghost, because I'd actually read that for a festival when I used to be in a drama group. And also, I really love the Kate Bush song of the same name. I think it just makes it sound so intriguing and interesting, and when I got to the real book I found it neither intriguing nor interesting. For me, there's no romance whatsoever in this book. The protagonists are not enjoyable to read about. It's kind of told from afar, and I really wasn't into that at all. The actual only bit that I thought was good was the bit with the ghost, and I'd already read that for something else, so I was kind of expecting there to be more ghostly activity and more interesting things like that, but there wasn't. I feel like with this book you're getting into the story long after it's actually happened. I think Wuthering Heights is probably a bit of a Marmite book that you either love or hate, and I'm sorry, but I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. Maybe one day I'll give it another go, but I want to read a lot more classics first so I don't get put off again. Question 2 is your favourite time period to read about. Now, one of the things that has stopped me from reading so many classics is that I'm not really a big fan of a period drama. I didn't think I was really into reading about other time periods. I thought I was really a modern kind of gal. But one time period that I have been made to really enjoy by Agatha Christie is the sort of golden age of crime, the period that many of those books are set in, so 1900s to 1950s really, the early 20th century. But having said that, I am currently reading for a buddy read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and in the opening chapters of this there is a lot of talk about afternoon tea, and the protagonist talks about their tea as being a very simple tea of just tea and bread and butter, and I thought, oh, I would love to live in the time period where you just had a cup of tea and bread and butter in the afternoon. And then she goes on to talk about the elaborate teas they used to have at Mandalay, and I thought, oh, crumpets, scones, yeah, I need to have been in a time period where that is the norm to have afternoon tea. So really any book from an era where they had afternoon tea. So I'm going to include Jane Austen, whose books I've come to really recently. I enjoy those Regency times now where I didn't before, and I really enjoy a Victorian novel, certainly in the form of Dickens, who again in the last year I have really come to appreciate much more. So yeah, I'm going to say 19th century and early 20th century are time periods I do really enjoy reading about. Question 3 is your favourite fairy tale. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't think I have read any fairy tales in their original forms, although I probably have been told some. In their non-original forms, the less scary and dark versions, I have obviously read a lot of fairy tales and traditional tales while being a teacher. I always enjoy the wolf-centric ones. Three Little Pigs and Little Red Riding Hood are absolute classics. I'm sure that the original versions are way, way darker. Also, I've really enjoyed Jen Campbell's fairy tale series. The video that she put out most recently was a Three Bears one, and I so enjoyed Jen's telling of some of the versions of Goldilocks and the Three Bears from over the years. It was really interesting, and I plan to watch the rest of her series on fairy tales, and I will link that down below, but that is something I've discovered quite recently. I'm going to say another controversial opinion, which is that I am not a Disney person. I was raised in a kind of a Disney-free household, and therefore I've never been really into all the princess Disney stories, but I did go and see the live action version of Beauty and the Beast in the cinema, and I think maybe if I did read that fairy tale, it would be my favourite purely on the grounds of the giant library. I do think that Belle's tale is a bit, oh no, I'm stuck here with the Beast. Oh wait, he's got a really cool library. I don't mind being stuck here. Anyway, question 4 is, what is the classic that you are most embarrassed about not having read yet? I'm going to have to go with one of the most famous classics, Pride and Prejudice. I haven't read this yet. I have now, thanks to Jane Austen July, read Mansfield Park and Emma, and prior to that I had read Persuasion and Northanger Abbey, so I've just got Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility left to read, but I do feel pretty embarrassed I've never read Pride and Prejudice. I think it's one that I've avoided for various reasons, but the main one being that I feel like I just know the story of Pride and Prejudice too well to want to read it. I really do feel that I need to get on and read Pride and Prejudice ASAP. Which brings me on to the top 5 classics you would like to read soon. I am going to include a book on this list that I have mentioned on the channel several times, and I think I'm just going to keep mentioning it until I make myself finish reading it. It's a great book so far. I've already started it. It's the biggest volume on my giant TBR, and it is Don Quixote by Cervantes. If you've been watching my channel for a little while, you will know I made a video about this way back in May, talking about how it's the most intimidating book on my bookshelf, and since then I started reading it in June, but it's been on pause a little bit, and I do want to get back into this and read it very soon. So Don Quixote is the number 1 classic that I want to read soon. This copy of Pride and Prejudice is not on my giant TBR, and my mum recently acquired this for me in a charity shop, so thank you mum, but also very naughty because I'm not supposed to be having books, but can't turn down a present, especially when it's a book that I really want to read. And I was going to listen to this on audiobook anyway. I hope to have read this by the end of the year. If not, I'll definitely be reading it for Jane Austen July next year. The other 3 are all on my giant TBR, which is why I've picked them, and they are Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I think I probably have had this read to me when I was younger, but I've never read it by myself. And Pirates, come on. You've got to love a tale of pirates, so I definitely want to read this very soon. Also, I think it's Victorian, so I may be able to read it for Victober. The next one is definitely much more modern, but I'm going to include it as it's in a sort of, is it a classic? Probably a modern classic. It's written in the 80s, and this is The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. It's another very weighty tome, but it's one I've been wanting to read for a long time. And also, this book sits next to it on its shelf and has been for many years now, and that is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I have never read any Russian literature yet, and I do really want to get to Crime and Punishment. I've heard it's really, really good. I want to get to this one soon. Again, it's one of the larger books on my TBR. Other classics that I really want to get to that I don't own are more Dickens. I read Great Expectations earlier this year, and I read David Copperfield last year. I also have read Bleak House quite some time ago. So I do want to read more Dickens, and I hope that I will read Our Mutual Friend soon, because I hear that that's another really good one. And also I do want to read some of the other Bronte books. I have read Jane Eyre. I read that last year and I loved that. I really, really want to get to The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and some of the books by Anne Bronte, because I've heard that they are very good and I feel like they're a little bit more underrated than her sister's books. So yeah, I definitely want to give those a go as well. Question 6 is your favourite modern book or series of books based on a classic. One obvious one, loosely, very loosely based on Pride and Prejudice, that comes up a lot, is Bridget Jones' Diary. I have really enjoyed all of the series of Bridget Jones' Diary books. I love the diary format. I love the way Helen Fielding writes Bridget Jones. I just think she's a brilliant character. The other books I thought of are his Dark Materials trilogy. So we have Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass, all by Philip Pullman. This is said to be an interpretation of Paradise Lost, so I've gone with that. They are one of my favourite book series that I've read full stop, so I'll go with those. And if they are not a classic already, then they should be. Question 7 is your favourite movie version or TV series based on a classic. I haven't, to be honest, watched that many adaptations of classics because I'm not a huge fan of period drama, as I say, but I would say that my very, very favourite has got to be the Little Women adaptation from 2019, starring Saoirse Ronan and Florence Pugh and Laura Dern as Marmee. I just think this is a fantastic adaptation. I watched the film, I read the book, and I went and watched the film again at least twice more, and I've watched it on DVD since. I'm going to say that that is my favourite movie version of a classic. Question 8 is the worst classic to movie adaptation. Again, this is only my opinion, but I very recently watched the adaptation of Emma from 2020 after I'd read the book, and it just... I wanted to like it so much. Now, I know a lot of people love this adaptation, and I haven't actually as yet watched any other adaptations of Emma other than Clueless, but I just felt that a great many of the characters for me were completely miscast, and those that had been well cast were not given enough screen time, in my opinion. Some of the funniest aspects of the book were lost, and I felt that they were lost by this film just trying way too hard. I felt that they were trying so hard to be funny that it had lost a lot of the charm. I didn't really enjoy the portrayal of Emma. I thought she came across as much more of a horrible person than she did in the book for me, where I really quite liked her as a character. I did feel that what it did do really well was the character of Miss Bates, played by Miranda Hart. I thought that was brilliant casting and she was perfect for the part. Could have been given a bit more screen time. I thought the casting of Mr. and Mrs. Elton was very good, and I would have liked to have seen them having a bit more screen time too. The rest of the casting I wasn't particularly happy with, and I also thought that there were things added that just did not need to be there, such as, like, there's a scene where Emma has a random nosebleed, and I just didn't think that was necessary at all. Like, there's plenty of good stuff in the source material. I know a lot of people really, really like this film and think it's a good adaptation. Personally, for me, I did not enjoy it. Anyway, ran over. Now, question number 9 is your favourite edition or editions that you'd like to collect more classics from. This, for me, is the most beautiful classic that I own. I don't own very many classics, and I only own one of these beautiful Penguin cloth-bound editions. But if I was to get some more classics one day, when I'm off a book buying ban, I would choose for them to either be these cloth-bound editions, or there are also some very lovely Penguin paperbacks in similar sort of designs. But these are really beautiful, and this is my copy of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I just think that these Penguin classics have been so beautifully done, and I have looked longingly at some other ones of them in the bookshop. Final question is an underhyped classic you'd recommend to everyone. Ever since starting off my reading of classics, I would say that I have mainly read the big ones, like really hyped classics. The next classic that I read after Wuthering Heights was Northanger Abbey, then didn't read any classics for quite some time. I then read a really interesting book called The Rough Guide to Crime Fiction, and it details like the history of crime fiction and what came before it, and this led me to read 2 novels by Wilkie Collins, because The Moonstone, the first one that I read, is said to be like the first detective novel, and it's really good. It and its fellow sensation novel, The Woman in White, are both really excellent classics, but again, very famous classics. If The Moonstone isn't hyped, then I would say go and read The Moonstone, especially if you're a fan of detective fiction in any way. It's a very interesting story. After reading those 2 Wilkie Collins, I think my next experience of classics was Dickens. I read Bleak House, and that took me a very long time to read, so I then didn't return to any more Dickens for a little while. And then last year was when I really started to enjoy classics and appreciate them more. In the early part of the year, I read Little Women, Jane Eyre, The Secret Garden, which I had already read as a child, and I also read David Copperfield, all in quite quick succession. Coming on to this year, I've read Persuasion, I've read Great Expectations this year, and I've just recently read Emma and Mansfield Park. I finally feel like I've tuned into some of the classics, particularly Dickens and Austen, and I would just like to explore more of them. So if you are a classics fan, please comment down below and let me know what underhyped, or in fact overhyped, books should I read next that are classics. The book I am going to recommend for this prompt is probably the only underhyped classic that I think I've actually read, and that is Lady Audley's Secret. It is a Victorian novel, a sensation novel, and I found this really refreshing as a classic. This is just a really intriguing book with a big mystery at the heart of it that is less of a whodunit and more of a like, how are we going to get to the bottom of this type of mystery. At the bottom of the blurb it says that Lady Audley's Secret was originally published in 1862, a sensation novel featuring blackmail, bigamy and murder. Its massive success made Mary Elizabeth Braddon a household name. It remains a classic Victorian spine-tingler. I definitely think that this book does have its spine-tingling moments, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. So this was the classics book tag done by a person with, I feel, very little experience of classics, but wanting so much to get into them now that I've read a few. Thanks for watching my video today. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, that you will give it a like and maybe subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to hear from you in the comments below if you have read any classics that you think I would like. Certainly crime classics can be included as well. I hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice on the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.